Now it's time for On Point, where we speak to experts to dig that little bit deeper into the biggest news stories in the spotlight right now. As we've been reporting, President Moon Jae-in is in Europe this week. Over the weekend, he met with Pope Francis ahead of the G20 Leaders Summit in Rome. Now he's in Glasgow for that UN climate conference.
So how has he approached this trip, and has it been successful thus far? For more, we're joined by Professor Ramon Pacheco Pardo, Professor of International Relations at King's College London. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Now, Professor, President Moon Jae-in has been touting South Korea's ambitious plans to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. However, given South Korea's heavy reliance on fossil fuels, how do you rate the chances of that happening in less than 30 years?
Well, I think that South Korea has the potential to achieve its goals. If we look, for example, at European countries, they have been in Northern Europe, for example, they have been increasing the use of renewable energies at a very fast rate, something that we thought wouldn't be possible. And South Korea has the technology, has the potential partnerships with firms from other countries that would help it to achieve these goals. And I think right now there is the political will, because this is what the Korean people are demanding. So it will be very difficult for any future Korean president, including the one that will be inaugurated in May of next year, to back down, to move away from these goals. So I think this is something that the Korean people are going to demand from their leaders, and that Korea should be able to achieve.
Right, well, it doesn't really help matters much that we have China right on our next door step, and their leader, Xi Jinping, didn't even bother turning up in Glasgow, but hopefully South Korea can do what it can do. But President Moon insists his administration's Green New Deal can create jobs. Obviously, if this goes through, this will create well-paying jobs for a skilled workforce, but almost certainly at the expense of those currently working within the energy sector we have now. You touched on it briefly in your previous answer, but do you believe there is sufficient political will in South Korea to see his plan through, especially when there's so much going on, not only in South Korea right now, but around the world?
I think South Korea will have to implement a program to help those that will be losing their jobs. Some of them may be able to transition to some of these new jobs being created, engineers, for example. I do think, though, that if you look at the unemployment rate and even the youth unemployment rate, they are quite low. Youth unemployment rate is at its lowest since the Asian financial crisis. The unemployment rate has also been going down in recent years. So what we see here is that Korea could potentially suffer a shortage of these high-skilled workers that will be needed for the transition. So there will need to be a training process in universities with the support of research centers and the support of the private sector. So I do think there is the will there. I do think that some people will need to be retrained because inevitably they're going to lose their jobs. But more importantly, I think that South Korea really needs to train the next generation of engineers and other workers that are going to be driving this transition forward.
And also, Professor, during his trip, President Moon Jae-in met with Pope Francis, Presidents Biden and Macron and others to get their support for the Korean peace process. But as President Moon is leaving office early next year, can we expect some concrete outcome before he leaves office?
I think there is limited time. We are approaching the winter. I wouldn't expect North Korea, for example, to call for a summit in the middle of December or January. So the time is going to be limited before the March presidential election or before Moon leaves office in early May. So I think it is difficult. What it might be possible, though, is to resume some sort of dialogue at the working level between the two Koreas, and to start a working level dialogue between the Biden administration and North Korea. So in a sense, the Moon government could be supporting, even leading these processes, But I do think that it will be up to the new South Korean president coming into office next year to really try to move peace in the Korean Peninsula forward. The time for Moon is very limited right now.
Yeah, a lot hinging on that election in March next year. And finally, Professor, before he returns back home to Seoul, President Moon is going to go to Hungary. While he's there, he's going to hold this summit with the so-called Visegrad 4 that also includes Poland, Slovakia and the Czech Republic. What do you think President Moon is trying to extract out of those countries with that meeting? And on the other side of things, what do you think the Visegrad 4 want out of Seoul?
Well, this is a very interesting visit because this is where most South Korean companies, especially the big table, have been opening factories in recent years. So I would expect that President Moon is going to ask for political support, for example, in the form of tax breaks for the Korean companies that are continuing to open factories and offices across the region. He might also call for some support, for example, for Korean Peninsula peace, but I think most importantly in this particular visit is really the economics of it. And on the other side, very clearly they're going to be asking President Moon to go back to Korea and try to ask these companies to continue to invest in these countries. Obviously, the president cannot ask them to do so, but I think the visit will create a better political environment that will support further investment from Samsung, LG, Hyundai, really the big table that are the main Asian investors in this part of Europe, even above China and above Japan. So they're crucial for the creation of jobs in Central Eastern Europe, especially in the V4 countries.
All right. That was Professor Ramon Pacheco Pardo, Professor of International Relations at King's College London, on President Moon's trip to Europe. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you.
Thank you.